Hey, welcome. We spend so much time thinking about the risks of the things we do. But what if the biggest risk of all isn't what you do, but what you don't do? Today, we're diving into the hidden and sometimes huge cost of doing nothing, from the psychology of how we feel regret all the way to the very real impact it has on our bank accounts. So here's the game plan. We're going to kick things off with a classic psychological puzzle about regret. Then, we'll uncover a really surprising twist that flips everything on its head. After that, we'll see how that little twist can literally cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars. And finally, we'll pull it all together into a simple framework to help you decide when it's finally time to make a move. Let's jump in. All right, first up, the action regret trap. Let's talk about this idea we all have about regret and why our gut feeling about playing it safe can be completely wrong. Just think about it for a second in your own life. When you look back, what really gets to you more? Is it the regret from doing something that just blew up in your face? Or is it that nagging feeling of an opportunity you just let pass you by? Okay, so check out this famous scenario from the researchers Kahneman and Tversky. You've got two guys, Paul and George. Paul thinks about switching stocks but decides not to. George goes ahead and does switch his stocks. Now, in the end, they both miss out on the exact same amount of money, a $1,200 gain. The outcome is identical. But when you ask people who feels more regret, an overwhelming majority says it's George, the guy who actually took action. And this is a real thing. It's called the action effect. For a long time, it was kind of the gold standard in regret research. And it makes sense, right? A bad decision that you made feels way more personal. It stings more than a bad outcome that just sort of happened because you stayed put. But what if that's not the whole story? And that brings us to the twist in the tale. Because as soon as you add one critical ingredient, context, the whole script flips and we get something called the inaction effect. You see, that scenario with Paul and George, it happens in a vacuum. But in real life, our decisions are almost never made in a bubble. We're usually reacting to something that just happened. And that context, well, it's a total game changer.
So to test this, researchers came up with this brilliant scenario with two soccer coaches. Okay, version 1. Both coaches just won their last game. One coach decides to change his lineup. That's action. The other sticks with his winning formula. That's inaction. But then, they both lose their next game. Then they run the whole thing again, but this time, both coaches are coming off a loss. So, does that prior result change who feels worse about the new loss?
The results are absolutely fascinating. Just look at this. After a win, on the left, a staggering 91% of people said the coach who took action felt more regret. That's the classic action effect we just talked about. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? But look what happens after a loss. It completely flips on its head. Now, 69% of people say the coach who did nothing, the one who stuck with a losing team, felt more regret. And that, right there, is the inaction effect. So why the huge flip? It all comes down to one powerful word: responsibility. After you lose, the normal thing to do, the expected thing is to make a change, right? You got to try something. So when the coach does nothing and then loses again, that inaction suddenly feels irresponsible. The context of that prior failure completely changes our perception of what the right move was supposed to be. Now, this isn't just some fun psychological quirk. This bias we have towards inaction, especially when things are already going badly, can have massive, real-world financial consequences. Let's make this crystal clear. Imagine two investors. They're both super disciplined. They invest the exact same $200 every month. They even get the same 8% return. The only difference is that investor B waited 10 years to get started. Just a simple decade of inaction. So by age 65, investor B, the one who started at 35, has built up almost $300,000. And hey, that's a great result. That's a very respectable nest egg. But what about the person who started earlier? Well, investor A, who started just 10 years earlier, by age 65, they have almost $700,000. That's not just a little more money. That is a fundamentally life-changing difference. Let's let that sink in. That 10-year delay, that period of doing nothing, cost investor B $400,000. That is the staggering, brutal power of compound interest, and it's the literal price tag for doing nothing. Okay, so let's bring this down from the world of big finance to something more everyday, because the cost of inaction isn't just about your retirement account. It shows up in the day-to-day grind of just trying to run a business. I love this. When a coffee shop owner on Reddit was asked about the most unexpected costs of their business, the answer was just so simple and so true. Things break is pretty much it. Every business owner knows this in their bones. And I mean, look at this list. In just 4 months, they had to deal with wiring, cabinets, a new lock, a security camera, display cases. The list goes on. Now, none of these things on their own are catastrophic, right? But the failure to act, in this case, the failure to budget for these totally inevitable costs, turns a bunch of small problems into a constant, grinding source of financial stress. It's the cost of not planning for reality. Okay, so we've seen how inaction can lead to deeper regret, cost us a fortune, and create nonstop stress. So what do we do about it? How do we make better decisions? Let's try to build a simple framework. All right, here are 3 quick steps. First, assess the context. Are you in a post-loss situation? Is the current situation already not great? If it is, you have to recognize that action is now the expected norm, and doing nothing is probably going to feel a lot worse if you fail again. Second, calculate the long-term cost. Do the math, seriously. What does a 5 or 10-year delay actually look like for your goals? Put a real, hard dollar amount on your inaction. And finally, number 3. Budget for the short-term cost. Just accept it. Things break. Your car, your computer, the espresso machine. Planning for these costs ahead of time is the single best antidote to the stress of inaction. And that really brings us to the final thought I want to leave you with. We so often see inaction as the safe choice, the path of least resistance. But as we've seen, sometimes the decision to do nothing, to not change the team, to not start investing, to not budget for repairs, is the single riskiest decision you can possibly make. So ask yourself, what safe inaction in your life might actually be your biggest risk?